Beautiful Wednesday morning to you wherever you're tuned into MITV Plus, the sixth day of the month of May 2026. And welcome to Business Spotlight, where we bring you news and impactful discussions in and around the business fair. I am Layo Shobo for Lauren Shaw, and delving straight into the stories. The House of Representatives has called on the federal government to urgently intervene in the rising cost of aviation fuel, warning that domestic airlines are under severe financial pressure. The resolution followed the adoption of a motion of urgent public importance moved during the plenary by Pascal Agbodike, who represents Ihiala Federal Constituency of Anambra State. Agbodike said aviation turbine kerosene remains a major cost driver for airlines, accounting for between 40 and 60% of the total operating expenses. He said airline operators are struggling for survival while also offering quality services together with the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority, though several airlines have already begun scaling back operations due to rising costs. The motion was unanimously supported during the session presided over by Deputy Speaker Benjamin Kalu. Lawmakers urged the federal government, through the Ministry of Petroleum Resources and the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL), to establish a price stabilization arrangement with local airlines to ensure predictable jet fuel pricing. The House also mandated its Committee on Aviation, Petroleum Resources Downstream, and Finance to investigate the persistent price increase within 2 weeks. It further directed the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo San, to present an emergency roadmap to reduce aviation fuel costs within the same period. Meanwhile, the federal government has sealed a partnership with European aircraft manufacturing giant Airbus, targeting critical areas such as infrastructure development, maintenance capacity, human capital growth, among others. The agreement, formalized through a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU), was announced in a statement made available to newsmen on Monday. According to the MOU, the agreement was signed by the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo San, during a working visit to Airbus's global headquarters in France. Keyamo described the agreement as a major leap for the sector, saying the pact is expected to fast-track Nigeria's ambition to building a sustainable and globally competitive aviation ecosystem. Under the terms of the agreement, Airbus will provide wide-ranging support spanning aviation infrastructure development, training of pilots and engineers, and advisory services on maintenance, repair, and overhaul operations. President of Airbus for Africa and the Middle East, Gabriel Similas, underscored Nigeria's central role in Africa's aviation future. Data from the company's latest global market forecast shows Africa is expected to require about 1,490 new passenger and cargo aircraft by 2044. In tandem, the continent will need over 20,000 pilots, 20,000 maintenance engineers, and 21,000 cabin crew to support the anticipated growth. And in the meantime, the Aviation Ground Handlers Association of Nigeria, AGAN, has issued a final ultimatum to airlines over an estimated 9 billion naira debt, threatening to withdraw critical ground handling services if payments are not made within 3 days. In a letter addressed to the Airlines Operators of Nigeria and dated April 30, 2026, as obtained by our correspondent, the ground handlers expressed deep frustration over what they described as prolonged silence and inaction from airline operators despite earlier engagement. Recall that AGAN had earlier given a 7-working-day ultimatum to the airlines, but they claimed that they had been ignored. The group warned that the continued lack of response has worsened the financial burden on its members, many of whom provide essential services such as aircraft marshalling, baggage handling, and ramp operations at airports nationwide. Agan added that continued lack of response has further heightened the financial and operational strain on its members, who have consistently engaged in good faith efforts towards an amicable resolution without success. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL) has signed a fresh agreement with two Chinese firms to accelerate the long-delayed rehabilitation and commercial restart of Nigeria's refineries in Port Harcourt and Warri, while opening a new window for technical equity partnerships. This is coming nearly 1 year after announcing a planned shutdown for maintenance of the Port Harcourt refinery. The shutdown began on May 24, 2025, barely 6 months after a previous period of operational resumption following a $1.5 billion rehabilitation project. The new deal, structured as a memorandum of understanding, was signed with Sanjian Chemical Company Limited and Zinshan Industrial Park Operation and Maintenance and Management Company Limited, marking what the national oil company described as a critical milestone in its refinery transformation drive. The agreement, executed in Jiaxing City, China on April 30, 2026, by the Group Chief Executive Officer of NNPCL, Bashir Bayo Ojulari, alongside the Chairman of Sanjian Chemical Company, Guan Zianhong, and the Chairman of Xincheng Industrial Park, Bill Bei. In spite of the Supreme Court's judgment granting financial autonomy to the third tier of government, some state governments received 1.46 trillion naira meant for local government councils in the first quarter of 2026. Data from the Federation Account Allocation Committee reports the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation and the National Bureau of Statistics showed that local government councils were allocated 1.46 trillion naira from revenue earned in January, February, and March 2026, but shared in February, March, and April, respectively. The amount represented a 19.05% increase compared with the 1.23 trillion naira received by the councils from the corresponding revenue period in 2025. However, the allocations were still processed within the FAAC distribution structure amid continued delay in the full implementation of the July 11, 2024 Supreme Court judgment, which ordered that allocations to local government councils be paid directly to democratically elected councils. The Apex Court had held that state government had no constitutional authority to retain, spend, or control funds standing to the credit of local government council. However, almost 2 years after that judgment, the implementation of direct payments to the 774 local government areas has remained stalled, with state governments still playing a dominant role in the management of council finances. According to the FAAC figures, councils received 537.88 billion naira from January 2026 revenue shared in February. The Securities and Exchange Commission has raised concerns over weak sustainability report among Nigerian companies, warning that poor disclosure practices could hinder their access to global capital. The Director General of SEC, Momotimi Agama, stated this in Abuja at the launch of the Nigerian Corporate Sustainability Report by Nuremberg Research. Agama said many listed companies still lack structured and verifiable sustainability disclosures, describing the trend as a challenge that must be urgently addressed. He explained that the fact that a meaningful number of listed companies still lack coherent sustainability disclosures or provide disclosures that are neither structured nor verifiable is a challenge that SEC must confront collectively as a market. He noted that sustainability reporting has become central to global investment decisions as international investors increasingly prioritize environmental, social, and governance performance. He added that ESG considerations are now primary drivers of investment decisions and not secondary filters. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, has admitted that gaps persist in Nigeria's investment ecosystem as the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission flagged bureaucratic bottlenecks slowing investor inflows. Oduwole made the admission during a meeting with a delegation of the Commission in Abuja, where both sides discussed the need to improve the country's investment climate. The Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission had earlier raised concerns over delays in investment processes, particularly company registration, warning that Nigeria risks losing capital to more efficient jurisdictions. Speaking during the engagement, Chairman of the Commission's Investment Monitoring Committee, Enefe Ekene, said the Commission had been tracking inefficiencies within the system and deemed it necessary to engage directly with the ministry to address them. He stated that the Committee on Investment Monitoring has been closely tracking investment-related processes and that the Commission felt it necessary to engage directly with the ministry to address some of the bottlenecks it has observed. Ekene pointed out that delays of up to 2 to 3 weeks for company registration were no longer competitive in a fast-paced global environment where investors expect quicker turnaround times. Meanwhile, the United States and China are locked in a fresh confrontation over sanctions targeting Chinese oil refineries accused of processing Iranian crude, escalating tensions between the world's two largest economies. According to oilprice.com, China's Ministry of Commerce has issued a prohibition order directing companies operating within its jurisdiction to disregard United States sanctions imposed on 5 Chinese refineries. The move marks Beijing's first use of its 2021 blocking rules, a legal instrument designed to counter foreign measures which are deemed to have extraterritorial reach. The development follows sanctions announced in April by the United States Treasury Department against the affected refineries, which Washington accuses of generating billions of dollars in revenue for Iran by refining its crude oil in defiance of existing restrictions. The Chinese government, however, rejected the United States action, arguing that the sanctions violate international law and constitute interference in China's internal affairs. Citing its anti-foreign sanctions law and the blocking rules, Beijing has instructed domestic firms to continue business dealings with the targeted refineries. The order effectively places multinational companies and financial institutions in a difficult position. Firms that comply with U.S. sanctions risk breaching Chinese laws and facing penalties such as fines, lawsuits, or operational restrictions within China. And now to the interview segment of the Business Spotlight today. Our correspondent, Abiola Ismail, takes a look at strengthening Nigeria's economy in the face of security threats as he engages in a discussion with a retired naval commodore and professor of international relations and strategic studies, Professor Adekunle Olawumi. Let's join the conversation.
Hello, you're welcome to your favorite program, Business Spotlight. Hi, I'm Abiola Ismail, your host. Today we shall be looking at strengthening Nigeria's economy in the face of security threats. And I have with me a professor of international relations and strategic study. He is a retired naval commander. He's also High Chief of the state. I'm not talking about no one else than Professor Adekunle Lawuni of Island University here in Ogun State. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
Nice to have you here.
Yes, sir. We are looking at how have rising security threats affected Nigeria's economic growth and investors' confidence over the years?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it's very obvious to the population because if you want to look at the economic indices from the CBN or from Ministry of Finance, you will be misguided because sometimes statistics does not reflect the actually what is going on. And when you look at the statistics and you look at the people, there's a dichotomy. I mean, it does not really work very well. The insecurity in the country, it just shows that the government and their handlers, I'm talking about the president, are not actually looking at what we call the protective security measure that's supposed to be directed at the productive sector. There's a difference between the usual economic indices where you look at the inflation rate, look at the interest rates, you look at, maybe, cost of borrowing, look at the foreign direct investment or portfolio investment, then you use that to measure the economic well-being of the country. But it's not the case in Nigeria because you have to look at the production and the productive sector. For instance, you look at the land space whereby our people cultivate, food and other things that consumer, uses, You also look at the transport, the road, for instance, as simple as the road. You look at how it has become a catalyst for increase in the cost of production and cost of livelihood. If you want to move goods and services from, let's say, Sokoto, Kano, Maiduguri to Lagos, 20 years ago maybe, but now you see that it has actually increased the cost of goods and services. So ordinary road is something that they're supposed to look at, the production space. Then you mentioned something that is very important, which is the capital, What the statistics shows most times is the, what I would call portfolio investments, or portfolio investors, where people just jump in, do their contracts, and jump out because there's no confidence, there's no trust in investors. I mean, investors don't trust the economy, they don't trust even the space, where they want to operate. So if you are using the portfolio investment to measure the kind of economic recovery we are having, I think you are going to be getting it wrong. So we need to look at 4 indices: the land space, the transportation aspect. I don't want to mention about the cost of diesel and petrol. I have to mention even the pipelines, where your economic lifeline is in the oil sector, and you also have security issues with your pipeline protection. So when you look at the spaces where you produce goods and services, farm, market, and so on, they're not safe. Your roads, the means of transportation has increased, prices. Your pipelines are not safe. So even your revenue is depleting. And the issue of trust in the economy and the issue of foreign direct investment itself, not portfolio investment, those are the 4 areas the handlers of the president needs to look into.
But most times, foreign direct investment or the portfolios that you mentioned usually look at the data that they get from CBN or from
Yeah.
Nigerian Bureau of Statistics.
Yeah.
How do you think this can help in changing their confidence in Nigeria that, okay, we can go and invest in Nigeria despite the security?
Yeah, statistics and data, especially when you go to National Bureau of Statistics, can actually galvanize, and encourage people to come in. But if you want me to speak the truth to the government, the reality is that those sectors I've just mentioned needs to be looked into. If the productive security, I want to term it, is not well taken care of by the government, then it's going to be very difficult for the economy to recover in the long term. But in the short term, of course, maybe when you have your portfolio investors, and some of the few foreign direct investors, I've seen the Chinese, coming around. But we have to also be careful with the Chinese. What they do basically is to just come and open a shop. You think it's a warehouse or a production center, but it's just basically a shop where all knockdown products or maybe already manufactured products are brought into for sale. So you have to be careful when you are looking at the foreign direct investments. The relevant authorities in Nigeria have to scrutinize the Chinese investments very carefully so that we don't run into trouble in the long run. The issue of employment and issue of the workspace, how it's going to benefit our people has to be considered.
So, in your view, as a retired naval officer, what major security challenges are currently weakening Nigeria's economy?
Of course, it's the terrorism, the issue of, they call them different names, banditry, farmer headers, kidnapping, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and so on. Those are the major security, if I want to answer you directly. But as a professional, those are not just the only aspects of insecurity. We should begin to understand that insecurity should not be seen from that perspective of kinetics, where people are shooting or kidnapping and so on. I think the major thing for strategic thinkers, what I will look at is how lack of education, poor education, opportunities, lack of opportunities in Nigeria, poverty, let me say weak governance, and lack of, in the security aspect, when you look at the lack of synergy between the intelligence organs, in other words, they are not cohesive enough. Those are the major thing that is actually leading to the insecurity of Boko Haram that we are talking about. Because if you are talking to somebody like me, I'm not going to look at insecurity from that perspective. I'm looking at the background to that obvious things that we're saying. What is the background? It's just because there are a lot of population. From my statistics, almost 130 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. And that is a recruiting ground for criminalities, for Boko Haram that we are talking about, for armed robbery, for kidnapping, and so on. So for me, I want to look at insecurity from the perspective of the education, issue of welfare, safety, and so on. Basically, in economics terms, we look at the social welfare function of the government itself. How have they done in terms of education, good health, and so on? And how has that in the long term led to a breeding ground for criminalities? So I think we should be thinking of how to govern our people much better than we are doing. Nigeria is one of the richest countries in the world. We do not deserve to have about 60 to 70% of the population multidimensionally poor. That is the basis, that is the baseline, that is where the insecurity comes from.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
We've
you.
been talking to Professor Adekunle Olawomi, a retired naval commander. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
It's a pleasure.
My name is still Abiola Ismail. I'm leaving now to Layo.
This is where we draw the curtain on Business Spotlight today. Thank you for staying with us. Do well to follow us on all our social media platforms at MITV+_NG on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. You can also watch our programs live on YouTube at MITV+_NG. Remember to click the like and subscribe button. I am Layo Shobo for Lawrence Shaw. Do enjoy the rest of the day.